Welcome back to the Raw Selection Private Equity Podcast. Joining us today is John Dahlgren, VP of Talent at SBJ Capital, a lower middle market private equity firm based in the US. Today's going to be a deep dive into portfolio executive hiring. We're also hiring for the private equity firm. We are seeing a huge amount of increase in demand for operating partner talent, recruiting talent at private equity firms, whatever you want to call it, both supporting private equity appointments, but also specifically portfolio executive hiring. So this will give you a bit of a framework as to how the guys and John are doing it at SBJ, but also giving you a bit of an indication as to how you can implement that within your firm. So John, if you could give us a brief insight into you, please.
Yeah, I was happy to. So I'm originally from the Midwest. I'm from Indiana, studied entrepreneurship at Ball State University. And when I graduated, my plan was to open up a business actually in the adventure travel space. But 2009 ended up being not the most conducive time to start a business, and kind of fell into executive search and wanted to kind of leverage my background and focused on private equity backed businesses. I did that for about 9 years or so before I shifted internal to private equity, which is where I've been since 2019. And I joined SBJ Capital back in 2022. This will probably be my forever home. At the core, we are lower middle market private equity, focus on founder-led businesses, pretty much always the first-time institutional capital, and we focus in consumer and business services. And I would say we very much have a partnership approach to all the investments that we make, looking to partner with founders and help them, scale and bring in additional resources to help drive value creation through our whole periods and beyond. So a little bit about me, a little bit about the firm. Happy to answer more.
What's one mistake that you see either private equity firms or portfolio companies making, and what would you suggest to correct them?
In environments like this, where you have inflationary pressures, when you have issues where you don't have perhaps a deal flow that you wanted to see, a little bit slower M&A market, you do have some firms that are venturing outside of maybe their core mandate and perhaps trying to force deals that may be not right down the fairway for them. I mean, I'm probably one who would preach more patience and knowing what you do best versus broadening the aperture too far and stepping outside of what might be the core focus for a firm. I think it's really important to know exactly who you are. At SBJ Capital, we know exactly the types of deals that we are equipped to help drive success and to help us have the best outcomes. So I think that's probably one thing that I would say I observe. And if there's another, and I think this is changing, but for a longer period of time, private equity in general was underinvesting on the portfolio operations side of these teams. And you can probably speculate as to why that might be, but I think that is a trend that is changing, where I think a lot of the partners and investment professionals are starting to find nice counterbalance with building out portfolio operations, and the recognition that they can have some close relationships with individuals they can embed internal to the firm and create a working cadence that helps them more quickly drive value creation at some of these portfolio companies and use trusted resources that are embedded, which is also attractive to a founder when they're looking at different PE groups. It's sometimes a little difficult to stand out from the noise, but seeing individuals and resources they would have quick access to, I think is always exciting to an individual who wants to grow their business.
Okay, so what advice would you give to private equity firms that are considering hiring an internal talent function? As you mentioned there, the build out of operational resources is a fairly new aspect to private equity. So what would you share to private equity firms that are considering adding that internal talent function?
A really good question. And just with, I think, other portfolio operations roles, no two are the same, and how you leverage an internal talent function and that individual skill sets probably not going to be the same across firms. If we're talking about roles, it can start from anywhere anywhere around the assessment and looking at the org design and talking through that process and helping think through even pre the commitment to hiring a role, the actual role that's needed, working up to a job spec and running through the entirety of that process. That can be what the engagement looks like. There are also situations where I might just touch the surface, make a few search firm recommendations to some of our teams and help try to find leverage, whether it's mid-level hiring, negotiating broader contracts across multiple portfolio companies to get talent brought to us is something that I'd be involved in, but I'm not going to be interviewing a bunch of managers. On a CEO search side, it could start from what are the performance measures that we're going to be looking at? What are going to be the scorecards we're going to measure them against? What's the process going to look like? How are we going to assess these individuals throughout it? And then for the rest of the hold, how are we going to continue to keep going back and assessing these executives to make sure that they're the right individuals to get us to the ultimate outcome in the situations where we are hiring CEOs, which isn't always the case.
So when you're running a process, and I know you do the fund and the firm level hiring, but we'll focus on the portfolio side of things initially. How are you partnering with the portfolio companies? How do you, if you've just made a new acquisition, you've got a chief executive already and maybe came with the business. How are you partnering with them? What are you, how is that relationship being built so they feel that you're not just coming in and defining who they're going to be their next CFO or whatever from there? What are you doing about that?
It's a great question. And at the core of everything I do and everything my firm does, it has to be, and it is a partnership approach. And you're not going to be successful in private equity if you aren't going into every interaction focused on being open, being genuine, helping people understand that we care about people and we invest in people. And it's probably the number one thing that we can do to drive value at our portfolio companies is make sure that we have emphasized having great people in the organization and a trusted partnership. So they are our greatest assets. When you start from that foundation, you can then work into driving an efficient process. And I have the benefit of having spent so long in search myself. I kind of can see how the sausage is made. And I play this intermediary function where I can hold our recruiters accountable to the process they're running, point out when things seem a little bit awry, and help drive efficiency and speed and quality in that process. At the same time, interpret to our portfolio companies when things seem odd, maybe they aren't, and maybe it's a natural process of executing a search, or where we need to actually perhaps push our search partners and maybe hold them a little bit more accountable. So it helps having that kind of intermediary who can really be focused on, quarterbacking a successful search at all points in time.
And every search has a different need and requirement, industry, product, roll-up, etc. But what are the elements that you look for in every CXO hire for every portfolio company?
Yeah, I would not say that there are a ton that are consistent across the board, and those that are probably not a revelation. In lower middle market PE, which we define as we're looking at businesses between about 4 to 15 million in EBITDA at the point in time when we invest. It's important for us when we're hiring executives, most of them, that they have some experience in private equity before. For all the reasons we're aware of. It's the reporting demands, the speed, the pace, the need to be able to be a little bit scrappy and get in the weeds, but also be highly strategic and understand that if you're jumping down into the details, we don't want you to live down there. And, you need to be willing to do it for a time. So then we can eventually scale and get you out of it. Those are not things that I think every person's built for. So that's probably the number one thing that we have to assess as a consistent basis across these candidates.
Okay. Do you look for anything from an attributes or skill sets perspective outside of private equity back?
I mean, I would say these would be the things that we would look for even outside of a private equity backed environment. So the collaborative nature, the drive, the communication, All of those factors are going to help us be able to be effective in moving forward in the same direction. The other things that would obviously be, concerns would be individuals that haven't shown commitment to their employer or consistency. At the end of the day, people get into private equity knowing there's a finish line, and we want to make each hire, if we have to make a hire, only once during our hold. So if we have to hire a CFO, I only want to hire one. And that means spending our time to assess the individuals that we bring on board and making sure they're with us through to that transaction at the end. And that has really not been the case. I think not same for us, same for PE in general. I think the average is like 2.5 CFOs per private equity fold over the last 10 years, which is one thing that's made that role pretty difficult.
Yeah. Where have you made mistakes on portfolio executives, and nobody's perfect, certainly not in hiring. What have you reflected on with regards to what you've learned from those processes that you could share with us that you wouldn't do again?
Move quicker. I think we may be an anomaly in that we err more on the side of patience, but we probably go too far. I think as a firm, we're trying to refocus. And when we see those mishires, I think you can usually tell in the first 6 months, and we need to hold ourselves accountable to being even quicker. Fortunately, we don't come across this too often, so I think we're a little bit blessed in that regard. But there's one or two that come to my mind quickly that we probably just should have moved on from faster, admitted we hired the wrong person, and then move forward from there.
And looking at a fund perspective, what do you talk to us? Do we not have? I think we've had a couple of people on from a fund perspective, but you're obviously involved, as you mentioned, in the fund hiring and supporting that process. Similar type questions. What are you looking for when you're adding to the deal team and bringing people in at the fund level? Because I'm assuming that may be a little bit more different, maybe more cultural focused. What would you say are the key things you guys are exploring when you're adding to the team?
Yeah. We probably have around 20 people in the firm today. And with that, again, it operates sort of like a small business. So each person has an outsized impact on the culture. So it is super important to get the right person who's hired. And for us, we have standards that are very, very, very high when it comes to the individuals we hire, whether they're in the back office, their investment team, portfolio ops. So we take our time to make sure we get the right person on board. For us, we like individuals who, well, let's say investment professionals first, starting at associates and analysts in that level. We want individuals who think like investors. And sometimes with that age and that category, those individuals haven't really, let's say the broader group hasn't really shifted to looking at things through that type of lens. They're still a lot more quantitative in their focus and perhaps aren't really thinking longer term, proactively, multiple steps ahead. We search for those diamonds in the rough and again, take our time to find those. And fortunately, because of that, we've had very, very low turnover in our investment professional ranks. Only a handful who have left the firm over the decade plus we've been around. That also kind of speaks leagues to us as a firm because we hire people through the lens of could this person be a partner someday? And we promote a lot from within. So that scrutiny starts all the way at the junior ranks when we bring a new individual on. So yeah, same thing applies also on portfolio ops. We recently hired it's actually not as recent now, but we hired a vice president of growth strategy who we're very excited about, still continues to be incredibly impactful to the business. And that was one that was a little different, Alex, where it was rather opportunistic. And when you see the right thing come across the bow, you got to be able to act on it quickly. So I would say we're very thoughtful in that process.
And just before we came on air, you talked about very briefly about the talent to drive deal flow. Talk to us about how you're leveraging that process.
Yeah, so I've always had a passion around business development is sourcing in private equity. It's nothing that I ever wanted to do as a full-time focus, but there's so much connective tissue between search and between deal sourcing and private equity, and people may not appreciate that as much. So at my prior firm before I joined SBJ, I leveraged a lot of the relationships that I had from a talent perspective to help drive introductions to acquisition targets through a program that I really refined when it came to SBJ and helped roll out in partnership with our head of business development called our Origination Partner Program back in 2023, where we're partnering with industry experts to help us proactively hunt for deals and to help broaden our reach within the sectors that we know that we want to invest. Private equity in general is getting more and more focused in thematic investing, which I think is the right move. Getting laser focused on the types of deals and targets that you know are going to be best for your firm, where you know you want to put capital to work, where you know you have the muscles and the expertise to add value. And when you start to partner with industry experts, you can find more deals. You can hear about the deals in advance of them actually hiring bankers, just to make sure you're on the list and to start to think through your approach. Helps you be a lot more strategic at the end of the day. And the Origination Partner Program, we've engaged people across a ton of sectors, from food safety to spices and flavorings, because we like food products, to trade shows and events, to early childhood enrichment, childhood enrichment and early childhood education, kind of you name it. And it's been really advantageous. It's helped drive a lot of additional deals to the firm. And it helps us to get our name out there in the spaces where we want to continue to be known. So that's one thing that we've done. And any questions on the Origination Partner Program? I can give you more details.
Well, yeah. What kind of success has that brought? I mean, obviously bringing these processes, I'm assuming that it's brought kind of obviously new introductions, new conversations, pipeline, etc.
So pipeline, I would only be guesstimating, but we've probably sourced over, I don't know, somewhere between 50 to 100 deals, I would guess, over the year and a half this has been in existence. Now, we haven't closed on any of those yet. As a firm, we usually do, on average, maybe 2 platform investments a year, so it's not super high volume. And this is the same type of, you have to look at this through the same lens that you do just business development in general. There's a long tail on this, particularly because a chunk of these end up being proprietary, and it's all a factor of timing. So you can look at this as an engine for deals and also a marketing function for the firm in the sectors where you want to be known.
Okay, very good. And has that brought you, obviously from the executive perspective, how are you partnering with those executives to try and bring that in? What do you have a kind of a commercial relationship with them? Are you bringing them on board from a salary perspective? Are you paying them on a commission basis? How have you guys structured that? If you're happy to share, of course.
Yeah. So there's a lot of variability, and I think that's just an important factor here, Alex. So we have kind of categorically, I look at this as we have CEOs that are in pursuit of an investment target. So maybe it's an executive who just went through a PE transaction. They got a nice payday. They're taking some time to spend with their family to kind of recharge for a bit before they reload and dive into their next investment. Those individuals, there's this product of time. They have maybe 3 to 4 or 5 months while they perhaps interview for other roles, at the same time to be partnering with us to go hunt for deals proactively. I love that category. I think it's great, because if I'm a business owner and I have that person reaching out to me proactively, they have experience in their sector, they just went through a successful transaction, they look great. There's a lot more credibility than a buy side individual who's perhaps younger in their career, who doesn't have the same resume that individual does. So it drives engagement. So we like those folks. But On the flip side, we also have just expert advisors who aren't particularly interested in stepping into any type of executive role in the companies that we end up investing in. They want to maybe take an active board seat or something along those lines. And those can be folks who are maybe past full-time work stage of their life, and but they still want to dive in and leverage their knowledge. So those are typically more ongoing here and there. But to your question, there's always some upside economics when we get some of these deals done, and then what the engagement looks like outside of that kind of varies.
Makes sense. So what are your influences? What do you read? What do you watch? What do you listen to that you recommend others check out?
Let's see. What do I read? What do I watch? Most recent book that I read was called The Catalyst. It's actually on my desk right now. It's by Jonah Berger. Very, very interesting book that I think is applicable to anyone in private equity, but also just people in general. It's essentially a book that's about how you manage through change and how you drive people to ultimately open their minds up to different ideas and different influences. Part of this is understanding why people resist change inherently. And so they talk about things like reactance and endowment and distance, uncertainty, and other elements where it's the same things that we're all aware of. If it isn't broken, I don't want to fix it. Therefore, I'm not interested in hearing about new ideas. Or you push someone to entertain something new, and they immediately put up walls, and they don't want to listen to anything that's outside of what they perceive to be the norm. Or it's you introduce an idea that is so far off from how someone's considered, the world or, business process or whatever it is. It's just too far outside of their comfort zone, so they reject it. This book is all about how you kind of open up their minds, how you find ways to meet in the middle, and ultimately help move people off of sometimes what appear to be immovable positions, which is important because you might have, challenges at board levels, or you might have internal challenges with teams. You're going to, we all do. So I think there are some concepts here that I think are nice to just kind of embed in your approach. What else? I love, honestly, Parker Gale's PE Funcast. I'm essentially being a marketing tool for them, but I've listened to that for years. I think that's great. On the fun side, I love the podcast SmartLess, which I think it's I'll end up listening to that while I'm at the gym, and I probably look like a psychopath as I'm smiling from ear to ear or laughing out loud while I'm lifting weights. But that's typically the things that I'm diving into.
And if anybody wishes to reach out to you post this podcast, how best do they get in touch with you, please?
Yeah, they can reach out to me via LinkedIn, or my email is just first initial, last name at sbjcap.com. Happy to help, recommend different things that firms can do to enhance their talent function. I didn't get a chance to even talk about it as well, but we also have a deal referral program that we put in place this year. So when I'm working with search firms like yourself, Alex, and you hear of potential acquisition targets, we have a whole economic model for just referring those, whether they've been, whether they've hired a banker or they're proprietary. It's funny because management consultants, executive coaches, brokers, family office CIOs, retired CFOs and CEOs, all these folks end up hearing about deals or being attached to them in one way, shape, or another. Most of the time, they just don't know where to take them. So we created a program for them to kind of throw them over the fence to see if they're of interest, and hopefully help those business owners get connected to a good private equity partner.
That's great that you guys are using as many avenues as you possibly can to generate deal flow, and not just the traditional banking route, which we're seeing a lot more of private equity firms diversifying in all sorts of different things to generate deal flow, improve internal operations, etc., etc. But
Yeah, we have wonderful investment banking relationships as well. I think all of this is, at the end of the day, as a firm, I don't think it matters to us exactly where the introduction comes from. we just want to make sure that we are known to those business owners that are in the areas that we invest in. And you know, the channel means far less than making sure that we're working with the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, John, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, talking about my absolute favorite subject, which is talent hiring, executive professionals for private equity firms or portfolio companies. But appreciate your time and sharing your insights.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alex.
And thank you very much for everybody listening. Yet again, tuning into the Private Equity Podcast. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. But till the next time, keep smashing it. And thank you very much for listening.